Kamadat Ventiv and Yep Hamul, Lycia Maddocks. I am the political director here at NDN Collective, and we are coming to you live from the Supreme Court of the United States in what is colonially known as D.C., Piscataway territory. And you may have noticed that we just dropped our position paper on the repercussions of Roe v. Wade and through an Indigenous lens. And so we found it very important to speak with you all today. So thank you all for joining us. Again, I'm Lycia Maddocks. I'm the political director and lead of policy advocacy here at NDN Collective. And here with me, I have Kim Pate, who is our managing director of NDN Fund and also our acting vice president, who was assistant author on this position paper. And our position paper, The Effects of Overturning Roe v. Wade through an Indigenous Lens, was a really important paper for our organization. And what we were really trying to do was meet this political moment. We find it important to make sure that our audiences are educated on the issues that are going on right now, especially because of the effects that it has on Indian country. So we want to talk to you all today about why we decided to release this position paper, why we decided that now was a good time to do that, and why we're in D.C. this week as a collective. So to get us started, the paper outlines consent, body sovereignty, and self-determination. It really helps us to understand how this particular decision to overturn Roe v. Wade is going to actually play out in Indian country right now. And while we really don't know the full effect that it has, what we do know is that this is a system that is rooted in taking. It is rooted in violence against Indigenous women and femmes. It is rooted in inequity and disenfranchisement. And so what we really wanted to do was provide some education, some empowerment, some solutions, and really just make sure that Indigenous people and our allies had the information that they needed so that we can rise up together and make sure that at this critical juncture we are doing everything that we can to make sure that we are protecting our bodily autonomy, not just as Indigenous people but as collective communities. So I have Kim Pate, who was a primary author on this, and give us some thoughts on this. Tell us why it was really important to release this paper right now, and what is the political significance of this moment right now?
Thank you so much, Lycia. So we knew when the original draft opinion was leaked that pretty soon we were going to have a decision on our hands that was going to overturn 50 years of protections for people's sovereignty in their bodies and also their privacy. And so it was really important to us as an Indigenous-led organization that we bring all of the voices of our organization together in power to talk about the potential harmful effects of the overturning of years of jurisprudence. That there's a way in which this is the beginning of the loss of rights in many sectors that we care about. And so because we are a multi-sectoral organization, we saw this as a moment for us to come together and demonstrate the unity that needs to exist in the world to be able to fight for the protection of our rights against those who would terminate those rights.
Thanks, Kim. And we, like Kim said, we came from multiple perspectives. We definitely made sure to take into account perspectives from anyone who can get pregnant. So you'll notice in the paper that we have perspectives from LGBTQIA2S plus folks. We have perspectives from people who, just believe that the decisions that one makes, whether they decide to keep a pregnancy or terminate pregnancy, is up to one themselves, to their person. And so we also talked about how, these systems that are rooted in inequity and taking have been this way for quite some time. And we also talk lightly about an unlight subject, which is the sterilization of Indigenous women, and how there were points in time where we still, did not have our rights, even though we became citizens according to this system in the U.S., and it never really was made for for us. It was always an attack of our bodies, and it continues to be an attack of our bodies. And we can see that not just through the judicial system, but we see that through legislation. And while we do see legislation that is giving more protection to missing and murdered Indigenous women, we still don't see enough funding for our Indian health systems for the victims of missing and murdered Indigenous people. So, for example, in our Indian health systems, we have been critically and chronically underfunded, which means that access to reproductive services has not always been available and is still not available for Indigenous people through the system that we rely on heavily for our health care. So we are already at a disadvantage, and it is one reason why I said we need to fight like hell for our rights and make sure that we can preserve whatever bodily autonomy that we have and expanding those rights. And that's why we have to codify Roe v. Wade. We also talk about the importance of the Native vote. We need representation. You know, we need to make sure that we have pro-choice representatives in our systems that are going to continue to advocate for bodily autonomy. And if we don't have representatives in these systems, then we get, you know, a minority of voices that affect a majority of people. And so that was, you know, another thing that we talked about too, because NDN Collective is really big on civic participation and making sure that folks are speaking up in the ways that make sense to them, whether it's organizing and activism or taking their voice to the ballot box.
Thanks, Lycia. So we're here this week in D.C. for the NDN Collective D.C. Impact Days, and we will be meeting with House offices, Senate offices, agencies where we have allies and where we are going to create allies, because we all have to come together now. We all have to fight to protect our rights.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you all for joining us today. Again, NDN Collective just released our position paper on the effects of overturning Roe v. Wade through an Indigenous lens, how consent, body sovereignty, and self-determination are the real conversation. So we encourage you to go to our website, ndncollective.org, read our entire position paper, give us your comments and your thoughts on it. We'd love to hear from you. We are out here trying to make sure that Indigenous people have a voice here so that we continue our advocacy. And like Kim said, we have a delegation here in Piscataway Territory, colonially known as DC, where we will be having conversations with decision makers that oversee these particular policies that affect our consent, self-determination, and our right to bodily sovereignty. So, yaha, thank you again for joining us, and you'll hear more from us throughout the week.